So I've got 5 panelists who are all quaking in their boots to come join me on stage here. Jamie, would you like to come back in and join again? I'm going to ask some questions and facilitate a debate, and then you're going to get an opportunity to ask some questions at the end as well. Jamie didn't introduce himself earlier, but Jamie is actually an entrepreneur at heart, and I know that many of you will know Glasses Direct. Very successful business that Jamie started whilst at university. He wasn't busy enough doing his course. He started a business that went to £30 million of turnover, 150 million, and sold it, and you're now industry head at Google. Thank you. Sam Crocker, can you please come up and join me? From Bray Leno. Brennan's a very, very respected communications group. Started in Devon, it's in London, it's in Bristol, it's in the Far East. It started about 40 years ago, before the internet existed, and you now run all of the digital channels, so it's fantastic to have you here. Thank you so much. Alison Kennett, please come on up. So, I don't know if people know SC Group, but it's one of the world's leading companies specializing in design and development of equipment operating in really harsh environments. They make the equipment that get offshore wind turbines to where they are, and you also make tanks. So, but you're really an innovative house. And Adrian Banks is the head of shared services at Safran landing gear. Anybody who flies an airplane knows that this sort of kit is pretty important. 25,000 aircraft are equipped with their gear. 40,000 landings a day done on their gear. They pioneered the introduction of carbon brakes, which reduced the weight of a comparable steel brake by about 50%. And Liz Hazeldene, who I know very well because Liz is a very key supplier to Screwfix. And I'm sure many of you own a Mira shower. And they've been a really innovative business, inventing thermostatic mixing valves, and you're going to hear more later on. But in 2001, they were bought by this incredible American family corporation called Kohler. If any of you get to the States, you'll see their brand everywhere. An enormous business that owns its own village, believe it or not. And I was at an event, actually, with Herb Kohler, who owns the business, and I was just making small talk. We were at Cheltenham, and I turned to one of his people and said, "What time do you all go back to the States?" Assuming they were going to go back to Heathrow, and they said, "Whatever time Herb wants." So there's 10 people all in beds on a plane on the private jet going back to the States. All of you share one thing in common, that you are leading companies in your sectors, and you've been specialising in the design and the development of all sorts of new products. Can I start with you, Jamie? Nice open question. But I think for me, all of this sort of stuff starts with customer needs, and understanding the customer needs is surely the right starting point for any type of innovation. Whether customers know it or not, whether they know the requirement or not. So how can new technologies help us in this room to start thinking through this?
Sure. I think so. I think about technology in a couple of ways in terms of deploying it. Let me talk about our engineers. So if you talk to the engineers at Google about how they deploy technology, how they create new things, what they talk about is something called design sprints. So they will basically start with a consumer need, a specific outcome that can benefit a customer or a challenge. And then they'll rapidly develop an idea using a small team of engineers, actually a cross-functional team comprising engineers, product managers, designers, to basically rapidly build that product to prototype stage. And then expose it safely to a controlled group of users and take feedback and iterate on that. And that happens the whole time in Google offices around the world. And in fact, there's a book written by an engineer called Prototyping, which I recommend using, because in any area of business, this is a very helpful way of thinking about some of the ideas that I've presented today, and actually taking them down a level and go, how are we actually going to used as how we're going to test this in our own businesses. It's very much a kind of start small mentality, but move very, very quickly in an agile way to customer feedback. If you like, fail fast, fail often, learn, move forward, and get to a product that people really, really want very quickly, or a technique. It's a technique that we can use in the business side of Google. It's a technique that any business can use in any function, I think.
Yes. Liz, do you fail a lot?
Yeah, in fairness, yes. And actually that's something that I can say very proudly. I mean, most people are afraid of failing, but actually, unless you can create a safe environment where you can fail, you're never going to progress. And it's interesting what Jamie was just saying about sprints. So we call them sprints or hot houses. And it's basically get the right people in the room, get them to look at the problem and get them to solve it by really focusing on what's your consumer value proposition, what is it that you're trying to solve, and don't move away until you've got the absolute answer to that. And the whole piece around failure is, unless you can experiment, unless you can have that free time, how are you ever going to genuinely innovate? Because some of the bonkers ideas are the ones that actually come down to practical solutions in the end. And you've got to allow that space and that time and that freedom to just kind of go with the bonkers for a little bit.
Is it the same or different from your point of view, Sam?
It's exactly the same, absolutely. So we have an innovation program we run called our Innovation Radar, and I think that's geared around qualifying quickly where to focus. So doing, as you say, fairly fast, looking at a lot of things and looking at where they are relevant to our business, or more importantly, where they're relevant to our clients' business is where we like to get to pretty quickly. I think the other thing for us is how quickly can we build a sort of prototype or a working model of something. And actually, if we can't, that's often quite a good qualification about whether it's quite right for us in itself. So that's the sort of approach, but it's absolutely...
But surely half the time customers don't know what they want. We've all wanted an iPhone and somebody set it in front of us. Alison, do your customers?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think often our customers will tell us what they want without understanding why or what they want to do with it, and it's helping them move to what's the problem you're trying to solve, almost what effect are you trying to create, that opens up options for doing things differently and for innovation. So, you know, a lot of our customers are obviously military and they have very rigorous structured processes for defining requirements, which can sometimes not be helpful. So it's about moving them into and using a different set of language to move them.
Yeah. Adrian?
I'm conscious that you talk about taking risks with innovation. If an aircraft doesn't land, it focuses the mind somewhat. That's obviously an extreme case. I think that one of the challenges that we have in a bigger, more traditional engineering manufacturing company is to challenge the mindset that innovation is somebody else's job. It's not just the R&D department who are called upon to innovate. It should be part of the job description of everyone in the company. And that's easy to say. It's difficult to introduce in a unionised traditional environment, but it's a challenge we have to make.
We'll come back to that a bit. One of the things I think a number of businesses, and probably a number of businesses that really struggle with, is there's loads of ideas coming out. We see loads of stuff, we read about loads of stuff, and it can be resource hungry, it can be intensive. Can you give us some, I'm going to go to you first if that's okay, can you give us sort of an idea of how you go about prioritising some of this innovation, this technology, because you can go down routes that lead, that are fruitless, and you can go down some routes that are amazing. How do you pick which one? And I was just conscious, thinking through Steve Jobs' re-entry back into Apple, where he closed down 200 programs and left 3. He was a genius, and he used 3, and he had a very clear view for business, but not all Steve Jobs. So how do you help your clients, or how can you help us in this room think through that problem?
Okay, so before answering that, there's probably a couple of things. One is that we're quite fortunate at Brand, we work with a breadth of clients, so it's not just innovating ourselves, but we're fortunate to see how we work with some very innovative businesses in terms of the products and services that they do. So it gives us a broad view of kind of how other people approach this. And I think it's probably useful to start by I'm going to get too theoretical here, but qualifying what innovation kind of means, because we see a lot of stuff from Jamie, which is great, this inspiration. And when people think innovation, they think of these huge, transformative, disruptive big moments, and it is that, and I get that. But actually, in our experience, the clients that do this well are the ones that have a committed focus to kind of solving everyday problems and not just those big things. So I've got this analogy around cricket. I think I've got this moving on this. Is if you play cricket, not every ball you're going to hit for six. And actually, if you try and hit every ball for six, you're probably more likely to miss in many occasions. But if you constantly build around getting ones and twos and making runs, then you build culture, you build confidence around investing in innovation. And then when a potential six comes along, you're more likely to kind of whack it out of the park. So I hope that kind of works as an analogy. But in terms of the process, to answer the question, one thing that, sorry, for that analogy, what Steve Jobs and his genius worked out pretty well is that there aren't 200 sixes here, we could probably focus on those three. But the process actually isn't that groundbreaking for us. What we've worked on a lot with clients where we do innovation programs is we build quite a simple matrix. So we will say, of all these ideas, and we work with clients to weight them, so it's not an off-the-shelf thing, but we'll say, how costly is this to build a pilot and how easily does it scale? Do we have the people, can we effectively measure it? Often a key one for clients is what differences it make to their customers and their customer experience. And it's interesting how just putting all ideas into this big funnel and just applying the matrix and getting the same people to kind of score it so it's less subjective gets you to a point of saying, well, that looks like the sorts of areas that we can do. And actually getting those quick wins to the fail fast kind of analogy is a good thing because then that kind of builds culture and confidence. So
Yeah.
that's how we approach it.
And Liz, from your side, you've got a very energetic CEO who's very focused on innovation, and it's normally top of your board agendas every time you do board meetings.
Yes.
He's obviously got he knows his product area, he knows what. But how do you pick in your organisation? How do you get CapEx? How do you?
Yeah, so I would bring it back down to a monetary level, which is if you want to achieve something, give yourself a target and then measure the how out of it. So there has to be a granularity within that as well. So I hear what you're saying about the iterative process. So we have two specific streams. We measure our vitality, so new products as a percentage of our total sales, and we have targets on that. But even within that, there's a granularity that says, okay, how much of that is facelift, it's iterative, it's known technology, we know what we're doing, and how much of that is absolute blue water going completely out of the park. And it's that commitment to say, we not only know how much we need from new technology and new products, we also know how much should come from completely new to the market, new, innovative, never been done before, and how much should come from, actually, I need to take some cost out of that, I need to value engineer it, it needs a facelift. And understanding how you balance those two together, because what happens is, and I'll hold my hands up to this, during a recession, you tend to turn off the bonkers ideas, because it might take 6, 10, 12 years to pay back. And actually what you shouldn't do is turn off those ideas, and why we're very lucky with the chairman who is very visionary is he will continue to invest through that period to say, if you turn this off, it's like the sausage machine where you stop putting the filling in, you're going to end up with a big gap in 2 years' time. So how do you keep pushing those really innovative things through? And you have to be brave, because honestly, we've got a project at the moment that is 6 years behind schedule. But when it comes to market, my God, this will be the F1 of the showering world. It's absolutely amazing. So it's kind of like, how do I keep that? But also, with one of our engineers sat in the room, also just, can you give me a new handset on that because it looks really old and shabby? So how do you balance these two?
And is it true that on your board meetings, the first agenda item every time is innovation?
Absolutely. So, and
he goes to that.
He goes at us, and every single product that we bring to market will have gone to the chairman for his approval or his input. And that's how highly they rate it. So globally, we all take our products to the chairman to talk through why is this innovative. And he will literally look at things and say, that's a copy of so-and-so, or that's just an iteration, go away and think again. So driven right through from the top.
Strong. And you see it when you bring it.
Oh my goodness, yes, we feel it.
Jamie, can I go to you on this point? I've been to Mountain View, I've been to London many, many times. you've got 1,000 people there, they're all doing stuff. There seems to be no resource constraints. It's probably largely around people, isn't it? The cost of
I'm definitely challenged. I think I feel more resource constrained than when I had a startup
Really?
business, absolutely.
How is that possible?
Well, I mean, like any business, there's so much that we could be doing, and it's a question of saying, what could we do, and then translating that into what should we do. And that's very, very hard at Google, to be honest, with so many products and platforms and features that we could be working on as a business team. I think that there's a couple things. There's a couple things that we do as a business that are in a book called How Google Works, which is by our chairman Eric Schmidt, and he talks about keeping focus within organisation design by having a very flat organisation structure, but having small, what we call pods, and each pod has a specific role and can innovate within that role. And people within those pods may have 20% time so that they can think also more broadly, but 80% of their time is focused on their day-to-day job. So as you say, day-to-day innovation is the most important thing. But then there also needs to be a part of you that's thinking about the long term. And that's sort of institutionalized at Google, if you like, within our organization structure, but also within this sort of philosophy of how we work. Those pods might have, say, six or more people in, and the manager we are encouraged as managers, and you can read about this in the book, to manage no fewer than 6 people. So it is impossible for us to micromanage, basically, simply in terms of the time that we can spend with those people physically each week. So by creating a structure around this concept of doing the day job, keeping focused, but carving out time as well, I think you can maybe give permission for people to sort of do both, if you like. But if I can generalise, from my experience of working with businesses at the moment, the reason why the talk started from the point of view of mobile, all businesses are now digital businesses, which means they're all mobile businesses. And if I can generalise in my interactions with business in general and on behalf of Google, usually the day-to-day priority that needs to be number one and is number one in many cases is adapting their business to suit clients or customers that are mobile.
Alison, your business, I'd imagine they're very large capexes. Entry into one of them it's going to be...
Yeah, I mean, there can be. Certainly in my current business, it tends to be more development on existing products. And sometimes we're lucky enough that customers will pay for that, and sometimes they don't. And that will come down to, if you want to be able to exploit it, it's better if you pay for it yourself. Sometimes they expect you to take the product already developed to them. But I think one of the advantages businesses like mine will have, and certainly in my previous business, the customer base is small enough that you can go and talk to them.
Yeah.
You can really understand almost individually the issues, their needs, and you can test stuff with them so that as you're making decisions about where you're going to invest, you're getting that immediate customer feedback. And I think it was Kennett used to run a fellows program, and they'd hold a fellows conference and invite in a number of big customers to bring the problem for the fellows to start solving on the day. And that was good because it helped direct investment, but it was also building relationships, especially with new clients that maybe you hadn't worked with before. And that worked really well for them.
I'm sure, yeah, that's a really interesting point. Adrian, your people, in terms of getting feedback from them, how do you go about that?
That's a really good question. It's probably the hardest issue that we face, to be perfectly honest. In my area, which is not in the engineering area, everyone has a set of objectives for the year. So this year, for the first time, we said everyone needs to generate at least 3 continuous improvement ideas, just to get the creative juices flowing, if you like. Yeah. I'm not sure if everyone does that throughout the business. I suspect not. But the biggest challenge we have with people is also communicating to them other people's innovations. So the example which is probably occupying my mind most at the moment is aerospace has had a great few years. Airbus, Boeing producing record numbers of planes, that cascades to a growing demand for landing gear, fantastic. That means that for each one we've got to produce them at a higher rate than we have in the past. And in the particular case of Gloucester, that means for the first time we've produced a moving assembly line for the high volume units. It doesn't move very fast, to be fair. You've got to really take your time to see it moving, but it's not like the car industry, but it moves. And it's great, you know, high investment, it's state-of-the-art equipment, that sort of thing. But it was, if I was critical, it was maybe introduced without the full engagement of all the stakeholders involved in that. It's a great sign for people that the company are investing, spending millions in this kind of thing, but you know, what do you think about it? How's that going to affect your day-to-day job? And we've had a few examples in my area, principally in supplying materials to that line, where if you were doing it again, you would maybe go through more of a change management process to get all these stakeholders involved and say, look, this is coming, this is the general direction, what do you want to see coming out of this change? And so now we're doing things that improvements will be made, but they're always easier to do before you've actually introduced the big change.
Same in your business, Alison? So it's the same in your business?
I think some of it, yes. As I say, in my current organisation, having not been there very long, I'm not quite so sure about, but I think there are some underlying similarities, common themes, if you like, around getting everybody involved. The challenge for how you harness and get agreement and use a more formal change management process is quite difficult, because for me it's that challenge, and I personally don't know how it works, but you know, you need to unleash stuff, you need to open up possibilities, but then how you harness it to deliver a business benefit.
I agree with you, there's a need for a process, I totally agree with that, but there's also a big place for you to talk to people. You don't need a process to go and talk to someone who you know will be affected by a change and who has a contribution to that change working effectively. What do you think about that, Tony?
Well, I think that one of the things that we've found is empowering people and allowing them to have skunk works. So it's to your 20%, which is, you know, we're not directing it, we just allow them the time and freedom to do things. And it might be that actually what they need to do is go running for an hour at lunchtime, because that will just free the mind. Or it might be that they want to go and fiddle around with something in one of the labs, but it will create an idea. And if I can give you an example, we have, there's a genuine consumer need to use less water, because otherwise the kids use all hot water, but to actually still feel like you've got a lovely, powerful shower. Now, how do you solve that problem? Actually, we solved it by one of our guys saying, do you know, this is the same problem you have when you're spraying chemicals on crops, which is you want to use the minimum amount of chemical and you want it to explode over the leaves and not go everywhere, you need it to go where you want it to. So by doing the skunk works around that and saying, how do you get bubbles of water and put bits of, effectively inject air into them so that when they hit the skin they spread, that came from crop spraying technology. Now, would we have ever got there had we have not allowed that guy to have his 20% of skunk works and go and have a fiddle about in the lab?
So what do you think is the role of it? Sorry.
I was going to put on the same is that, so our innovation radar, which is your skunk works, we made a point, I think Adrian made a good point around process, because it's easy to think innovation, and it is a very creative process. But actually, that's not to say it doesn't come without structure, which seems to be the anti of that. And if you say to a group of people, and you ask me the question about investment, can you go and do some innovation? That's a black hole of time and money. So it does need some direction, but not too tightly. The other thing that we have found is, and our CEO said this to me, which is useful advice when we first started this up, is what I don't want is a group of digital people talking about digital, because that's just an echo chamber. You need to bring in different people. So we bring in creative designers and client services to your point, to kind of make that stuff work.
What is it you're trying to solve?
Yeah, it's not purely about just the innovators, if that makes sense, or the creative minds.
I've got one final question before I facilitate some questions from the audience. I'm going to start with you, Liz. What's the role of the leader in all this?
The role of the leader is to allow people to fail, to inspire people to fail, to motivate them to do different things, and to be there helping people break the rules. So I get process, and we have lots and lots of process. Boy, oh boy, do we have process in Kohler. But actually, my role as a leader is to say, no, I'm here to help inspire you, to take you to new places, to help you, to give you permission to facilitate that and empower them. And you'll find that the best ideas come, the best innovation comes when somebody's completely empowered. They go, let me just think about that. How do you create that curiosity and that questioning so that people can get to the new place?
Can I ask the same question of you, please?
Down second and not fifth, not this one. Again, context, it's Safran in Gloucester is a well-established site, lots of people been there for decades.
Yeah.
My job, as someone who's relatively new to the site, is just to say that I expect you to think of ways of doing things differently. You know, I don't want you to come in Monday to Friday just do the same thing you've been doing forever. I expect you to engage your mind when you come in and just think something differently. It doesn't matter how big or how small. Just think about how to do things differently and better.
Does that resonate for you, Alison?
Yes, it does. I think as leaders we have lots of skills, but I think we only have one tool, and that is the ability to have what I call different conversations. It's about asking questions that are about possibilities. It's about learning, connecting people and allowing them to learn and not treat it as failure. You know, I've never failed at anything, but I've learned an awful lot. It's about never using words like, we'll prove it. It's recognising, I don't know about anybody else, but I've never had my best idea at work. So how do I create a space where people can have great ideas when they're not at work?
Yeah.
So
That's in the shower.
Yeah.
Sam?
So the only thing I can add to what's said, which I would agree with, is around celebration. I think that's the thing that leaders can do, is when a great moment happens, is making sure that the leader of the business is the one standing up there saying, this is a brilliant thing, you know, because that does foster, you know, kind of culture and recognition that that's what we want to be about.
Yeah, I think when I think about my own team, I suppose the only thing I could probably add to what's been said already, it's pretty difficult to say, is that maybe exposing yourself. And as you say, fear of failure is one of the hardest things to overcome. So exposing yourself in that way is probably useful.
If there was one thing, one project that you could do to transform Google in the coming year, what would it be?
That's interesting.
Drug prioritization.
Yeah. I'm completely stumped. I think Google can be so Google is a complex organisation, and I think we have to work harder and harder at simplicity as a business.
Yeah.
And if I could innovate in any way, I would innovate it within that constraint, as you say, for creativity around the theme of simplicity within the business.
Yeah. That's a good answer. Questions? We've got 5 minutes for questions. And there'll be a roving mic, and if you could stand up and explain your name and what business you work for, that would be helpful as well. Just in the back left.
Good morning, my name's Stephen Boyd. Could I ask the difference for those of you that are in manufacturing compared to those of you that are in marketing? The manufacturing people seem to mostly talk about innovation coming from within. However you've done it, it's within. Whereas Sam is very much more a marketing man who deals with clients. Do both of you, I don't mind who of the manufacturing replies, believe that innovation of product or your service should come from within your company, but innovation of marketing comes better from externals who look at the world in a broader context than you as manufacturers or service providers do yourselves?
So I'm happy to talk to that. So in terms of the solution might come from within, but very much you start with CVP, so customer value proposition. So even when you're solving a problem internally with a set of internal people, your problem definition will still start with the consumer, or actually the installer in our case, or actually the architect who specifies it, or actually any specification. So when I say the team solved the problem of innovation, it's only once the marketing team have defined what it is they're trying to solve and have absolutely nailed that CVP in terms of what we're trying to solve, and now how do we get resources to solve that. And then, so yes, we will solve it from within, but as I say, you then look outwards to say, okay, who else has solved a problem like this? How might we solve this differently? Crop sprayers. You know, I was absolutely scribbling down this morning. I want to be able to say, so Google, can you warm my shower up? I'm getting out of bed now. I wouldn't have thought of that. I don't know as a consumer that I need to do that, but I really, really want it now. So yes, we do look outside as well as internally.
I think, sorry, just on my side of that, I think you're absolutely right. I think we do need more of an external perspective, because that external perspective brings to us the need in the market. We can be a bit insular without that. The example in my company is landing gear, real pressure on reliability, because that decreases the uptime for the operators. And so we are now paying more attention to engineering, to health monitoring of landing systems when they're in operation. More sensors, more real-time monitoring, all that sort of thing, which honestly we didn't think of that need ourselves. That came from outside.
Good point on the marketing. So it's interesting for us, it's like generalism, but the number of clients who have amazing, innovative, what their products and services do, but and it's good because it's part of the reason why we exist as a business, is what they're not very good at is projecting that to the outside world. It sits within pockets within the business. And I get that that's hard. Sometimes you're talking about very skilled, specific engineers, and you're then asking them to sort of write content to put on social media channels and that sort of. So I mean that sort of stuff. It's a very different mindset to do that. But that's a lot of the work we do is less about sometimes doing innovation, but helping these businesses project that, A, for customer benefit and also for attract staff, which I know is another topic of today. And if anyone hasn't seen this, the best example I've seen in this in about the last 12 months is a thing called Lockheed Martin did around field trip to Mars. It's this group VR experience. So if anyone wants to have a look at that, that's a brilliant example of projecting innovation that they do to the outside world.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure it necessarily has a defined start and finish point. I think one of the things that, if you like, almost as leaders we need to do is make sure that our teams do have an external perspective, and sometimes you can't design that in, but it is about the conversations you have, talk about what's going on in the outside world, and it's being able to pick up some of those customer problems, themes, the available technology. I'm sitting here thinking about the assistance thing, thinking about how I can use that for my customers when they're out in the middle of a hostile environment. Truck breaks down and they've got to mend it. So for me it's about, where does that start? And sometimes it's about somebody has a spark of an idea and then they bring that back and look at it internally. So I'm not sure any business is ever one or the other.
I've just got time for one final question. So it's going to be between you both again. I'm not sure who I'm pointing at.
Adrian from University of Nottingham. Just wanted to follow on the external injection of ideas through providing open questions to universities to provide, through collaboration, those sorts of solutions, not just time limited, but continually grinding out the pipeline of ideas.
I'm happy to. So we use, we liaise a lot with universities in order to get some of those ideas, and one of the best examples I can give you is actually through manufacturing. So we're partnering with some guys from Cambridge University, and honestly the stuff we have learned from them, just coming in and going, what do you do like that? We're like, oh, doesn't everyone else? So for us, universities is like best practice. We also go in, it allows us to bring best practice, new thinking into areas where we probably couldn't otherwise afford to go and get that. So using it all the time, love it.
I also think that universities and academia in general is a very good source of, I'm going to call it pure research, really pure ideas. And businesses who win know how to collaborate with those universities and take those ideas and make them into something. So if I think about something like graphene, where that started, and businesses are now picking that up and making it into something real, because generally that's not what universities are there for. But there's a real rich source of ideas and technologies that organisations can leverage on, and having those relationships are really important.
There'll be opportunities to ask questions later on, but can I thank you, Jamie, Sam, Adrian, Alison and Liz for contributing to the panel. It's really good discussion. Thank you.